I'm going to be building more furniture, and I'm going to start with this. This thing right here is something that I made. It has to be, I think it was 1991. So yeah, I would have been 24 at the time, 24, 25, something like that. And I was making lots of stuff like this at the time. It's basically a little console table, and I made it 100% out of framing lumber, spruce, except for the parts that are made from plywood. I judiciously used plywood where it was needed, like for the drawer bottoms and the back of the cabinet here, because I'll explain as I go through this why you would choose to use plywood rather than solid wood for some parts of a cabinet, and why plywood would actually be the better choice. Before I get into building anything, I want to have a look at the features of this table. I built this, like I said, a long time ago, and it's been kicking around ever since. I really didn't build it for any reason, and it's kind of been, you know, here, there, and everywhere. It's made several moves with me all over the place. It's taken a lot of abuse, and it is in a little bit, you know, rough shape, especially on the top here. It's dinged and pitted a little bit, and there's some black paint on here, which I had no idea where that came from. But otherwise, it's in pretty good shape. And what I like about this mostly are its proportions and, you know, its size. It is, I do believe, 36 inches tall, and it is. The legs themselves are 25 inches, and as you can see down here, it has a fairly wide skirt or apron, which is almost 5 inches. I cut this little scallop in here as a decoration. I'm not crazy about that anymore. And I also cut this little groove around that to dress that up. I did that by hand, just with a carving knife. And I'm not entirely sold on that either at this point. But the proportions themselves I do like. The top section is 11 inches high, it's 12 inches wide, and it's 11 inches deep, and it has 3 drawers here that fill up the whole front. And the thing about the drawers is they have an integrated pull that I turned right into the front. Okay, I'm just going to set it up here and talk about some of the things that I don't like about it. First of all, I think that the legs are a little bit thin. I made these from dimensional lumber, like I said, and the stock that I was working with was just 1.5 by 1.5, so this is what I wound up with. And the back one here is a little bit dog-legged because there's a knot in there that made it bend over time. I guess it wasn't as dry as it could be before I made it, but that's the only one that bent like that. Also, I'm not crazy about the decoration cut in with the router, and I'm not going to do it on the new one. I think just a simple bevel or chamfer, basically the same proportions, but not a cove. Also, I like the drawers. They're the right size. I wasn't overly particular about how I put them together. I was careful with the front, obviously, but the sides are nice and thin, and I like that. That's 1/4 inch wood that I milled down. But when I joined it to the front, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this, because obviously there's not if it's held up for this long without failing, I just glued it and fired a couple of pins in, or a couple of brads in, and that was it. And the one on the back, yeah, it's the same way. I got a couple brads put in there. But the drawers have never stuck, and they've always slid smoothly. You know, they are small, and they're relatively well made. And one of the reasons for that is the plywood bottom. Plywood, like I said before, has its uses, and this is one of them. You want something on the bottom of the drawer that doesn't expand and contract with seasonal moisture changes, and plywood does that. Whereas if you were to use solid wood for the bottom here, first of all, you'd have to figure out the way to orient it. And usually for a drawer, you want to go the cross grain like this. And then you would have to let it into the side so that it could slide back and forth this way to expand and contract. If you constrain solid wood where it needs to expand and contract, it will crack. and cause problems. So the sides would have to be thicker to accommodate that as well. Now if I take the drawers out and I can flip it over, I've got some stuff in here still. First of all, I get a look on the inside here, and you can see that the slides themselves are just simple cleats that were actually just nailed onto the sides, front and back. They're not glued because, like I say, the sides are solid wood, and if you glue those on there, they'll constrain it and they'll make the sides crack because of the seasonal expansion contraction. Now you can see on the back here that the back is plywood, and that was one thing that I was doing, or I continue to do that actually. I try to make the back look reasonable, not to take it and slap it on and leave a plane and fire staples in it and all that. I just want to make it look as good as the sides, or almost as good as the front at least. And you can see that the pattern that I cut in the sides and the front on the top and the bottom here continue all the way around, and then the back is stained as well. And I think that's just 1/4 inch fir plywood there that I use for that. Now if I flip it over here, you can get a better look at how the apron is made and the legs are joined. Okay, I'll just tip this over so you can see inside here. There's lots of cobwebs. The way that the legs are joined to the apron are with these little corner blocks here, and these are glued to the apron, and then there's a screw that drives through the block and into the leg, and that's basically all that holds it on there. I don't think there's any glue on the leg and the apron itself. There really shouldn't be, because this is solid wood, solid wood, solid wood, and then I think, yeah, this is plywood back here. So I kind of cheaped out on the back again, but probably for a good reason. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with this method of doing that, but I think that I'm going to change that on the new one. I think I'm going to go with mortise and tenon to join the aprons to the legs, and it'll give a stronger construction, yes, and not that this is in any way weak, but it'll also be a simpler construction. This has a lot of parts, and then it uses screws all over the place. And I've got this very inelegant way of fastening the base to the top up here with these long screws that go down through the corner blocks like that. So I can improve upon that, I think. The first thing that I want to work on in this project is the base itself, the leg set. Like I said in the original here, the legs are a little bit too tiny, too wimpy looking, so I'm going to bump that up to 2 inches square to start with, and then I'm going to taper them to, lighten them up a little bit. So I've got my material here for, I can get, some of the stuff for 3 legs out of this. I've also got this piece over here that I'm going to rip as well, and then I'm going to have to laminate parts together to give me the final dimensions, because I don't have anything that's 2 inches thick. First thing I'm going to do is rip this one down to 2 1/8 and then rip 2 1/8 off the edge of this one. Well, I picked out the 4 best pieces for the main parts of the legs. All I need to do is set those aside, and that leaves me with these 2 right here that I need to cut down the middle, and that way I'll be able to make these ones thicker. I'll get 4 pieces out of this to go on each of the 4 legs. I can get the blade to come up high enough to cut these in one pass, but what I found in the past with especially this type of lumber is it can release some drying stress in there and it'll bind on the saw. So I'd rather make it in 2 cuts. So I've adjusted the blade to a height that's just a little bit more than halfway up, and then I'll flip it over and finish the cut. What I also did is I then cut these down to a uniform thickness, And the next step is to plane one side of these and also the thicker part flat. And I'm going to use my surface planer for that. Kind of tight. I've got my lathe in the way here. It's nice that this is on wheels though. All right, get that out, and then I've got my in-feed nut feed. Just slips in, and then it locks underneath there like that, and that'll keep it in place. And I'll plane the thin ones first, I think, because it's kind of down anyway. And then I'll adjust it up to do the thicker ones after. Well, I'm ready to start gluing these together. I've taken a few seconds to, pick out the better parts to go with each other here. And I've got my clamps set up and adjusted close, so ready to go. Just gonna do all of these at the same time, clamp them all at the same time, and then I'll have to leave them overnight to dry. The cooler temperature in the shop here is working with me. In this case, it's stopping the glue from setting up as quickly as it would if it was warmer in here, which is a good thing.